universe, that, as the Mayans had predicted, the universe had ended in 2012. We were now living in a simulation, which explained why everything these days seemed so messed up. Admittedly, this was an intriguing theory to consider as I walked through the longest night of the year, which so far happened to be moonless. A smattering of stars appeared in the sky, clotted here and there with tufts of cloud drifting low enough to reflect the pinkish lights of the town center and the Virginia Tech campus. So convincing, I thought to myself. I meant the reality of it all, like what I was seeing. It all seemed so believable. As it had become my habit on these random walks of mine, I decided to call my father. For the previous 3 months since my mother had died, he'd been living by himself on a remote piece of property in the mountains of southwestern North Carolina, in the big brick house that he and Mom had moved into when I was 16. I'd often imagined, though he'd claimed this was not the case, that he might be lonely. "Hello," he said. "Hey," I said. "What am I interrupting?" That was his line, the one he used whenever he called me. "Well," he replied, "I've been meaning to tell you. Some weird stuff's been happening." This wasn't news. Weird stuff had been happening for a while. The weirdest of all? My mother, at the improbably young age of 73, had died, even though I'd been there to help lower her coffin into the grave in our family cemetery, a clearing in the woods behind my parents' house, on land that my grandparents had originally purchased nearly 40 years before. I often caught myself wondering, where did she go? Everyone who'd known her had come to accept, more or less, how she would die. She'd been diagnosed with dementia in her mid-60s, and then Alzheimer's, and then finally Parkinson's. But the fact of her disappearance seemed no less incomprehensible. You see, once upon a time, my mother had been a dynamo. She whipped up extravagant meals, canned vegetables, baked bread, tended to flowers, managed finances in my father's dental office, served as leader for the so-called fruit program that sold boxes of Florida citrus to local townfolk in order to raise funds for our local church school, practiced the hymns she would play on the piano for church on Saturday morning, led religious educational classes for young children, corresponded with family members and distant friends, made trips to visit her parents and siblings in upstate South Carolina, refilled hummingbird feeders, read her Bible, drank cups of instant coffee, ate chocolate chip cookies, and laughed. Everyone in my family, on both sides, expected that she'd be the last to go, that as they wilted into the fragilities of senescence, she would be taking care of them. A decade before, it would have been impossible for any of our family members to imagine that she'd slowly expire 3 months before her 74th birthday. Of course, years before that, she'd stopped becoming herself. We all missed the versions of my mother before she'd disappeared for good. Once she was gone, we simply missed the person she'd always been. Daughter, friend, sister, wife, mother. As her eldest son, her disappearance imbued me with a new superpower. By imagining her standing in her kitchen, long before she could have had the wherewithal to imagine her future demise, I could make myself cry. I was, therefore, at all times and anywhere, 30 seconds away from tears. For 2 nights, my father said he'd looked out his bedroom window down the grassy hill to the pond and to a nearby mountain ridge. There, in the woods, he'd observed a number of lights in various places, flashing. A light would appear and disappear as quickly, bright, brief flashes. A few seconds later, others would appear somewhere else. According to my father, these lights never moved. That is, he had not been able to observe them as they moved. He'd only been able to perceive how they'd reappeared in different locations, giving the impression that there were either many lights or one single source that reignited after repositioning itself. His first explanation? Coon hunters. Even so, he hadn't heard any dogs. And what was also strange? The flashes hadn't behaved like flashlights, hadn't appeared as beams, hadn't swung through the dark. They'd simply flashed very quickly on and off, like mysterious signals.